Start by recognizing that your personality is social anxiety. This is you. This is the first most important step that you can take. This concept of the real me is one of the most damaging concepts, because it implies, I want y'all to think about this, it implies that the perfect product is there. I just need to get to it. I need to get rid of all this stuff. But there's the perfect me. The perfect me exists. If you're socially anxious, what happens is we make ourselves small, and then we project their dislike of us to make ourselves smaller, and then we try to disappear, and then we end up where our real self doesn't show up. This is real self too. Do you ever feel social anxiety has killed your personality? At my core, I'm witty and goofy, and it's my favorite thing about myself. My social anxiety has gotten so severe, I feel like I've lost all my personality. At work, I can hardly think of anything to say and will often be quiet for hours while all my colleagues chat with each other. When I do talk, my voice gets shaky and no one listens to me. I can never think of a single joke during the conversation when I was once so witty. And I feel like my colleagues think I'm the most monotone, boring person on earth. And it makes me so sad. Only my mom and sister know my funny side. Can anyone relate? In the early days of my psychiatric training, we used something called the 5-axis system to diagnose people. Axis 1 was disorders that happen to you. Axis 2 is personality disorders. The way you are is messed up. So I want y'all to understand the difference between these two things. So depending on how I was raised, I can develop a personality, right? So this is the way I am. It is not something that happens to me. So if I have a narcissistic personality disorder, I have an insecurity that is baked in. It is not something that happens to me. So I have an insecurity. I think I'm pathetic. I think I'm a loser. And so I have this narcissistic defense where if anyone points out that I'm a loser, I'm going to tell them you're wrong, and I'm going to get them to stop. I want to win awards. I want everyone to show me how great I am because I don't feel good on the inside. And early on in my psychiatric training, they explained to me that this is different from depression. Depression is when you have a normal personality structure, and when someone has major depressive disorder, there is a change. So this is the normal way that they are, but then they change, and then they have a sense of negative self-attitude. That's the technical term for it. They feel like they're pathetic, they're losers, they just have a negative attitude towards the self. It can take all kinds of different shapes and sizes. The key thing is they think negatively about themselves. And the whole point of major depressive disorder is that it fluctuates. Here's your real personality, and the depression is layered on top. And when it's active, you become a different person. You don't become a different person. Your mind alters its functioning. You're still the same person. And as we've learned more and more about psychiatry, we've started to realize that these distinctions are somewhat artificial. There's avoidant personality disorder, there's social anxiety disorder. The overlap between them is pretty big. And so in the most recent version of diagnostics, we've gotten rid of this axial system. We've said it's all basically one bucket. So here's the question that I have for you. You exist, and there's a funny and witty version of you. And then you go to work, and there's a quiet, monotone, and terrified version of you. Why do you assume that the witty version of you is the real you, and the socially anxious version of you is not the real you? Why isn't it that the socially anxious version is the real you, and the overly relaxed version of you is the fake you? Where do we get this idea that there is a real us and a not real us? This is the real me. Oh, but I just stopped being the real me over here. So this is the really nutty thing. So there's a lot of science that sort of supports this, right? This idea that this is the real me and this is not the real me. And if we look at things like trauma responses, if we look at things like, serotonin imbalances or whatever, so we can look at like social anxiety. And what happens in social anxiety, and I want to be technical here, okay? So I enter a particular environment. There are certain stimuli from that environment. I go to work. There are coworkers. I see coworkers. When there is a particular stimulus, it triggers a reaction. So that reaction is I start to think about what I'm saying. I overanalyze what I'm saying. It triggers certain changes in my brain, not changes in my brain, activations in my brain where I start to see ambiguous stimuli. So I walk past someone and they don't say hi. So this is an ambiguous stimulus. Maybe they dislike me, maybe they like me, maybe they're occupied, maybe they're thinking about what they need to get from the grocery store on the way home. Maybe they have a song stuck in their head that they're trying to get out of their head. But we take an ambiguous stimuli and our brain interprets it in a negative way. And then we have certain behavioral manifestations, not just what's on the inside, but then that manifests with monotone. I'm not going to talk. And we say, this is not the real me. This is the activation of our sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze. This is the survival mechanism of our brain and our body. When you're being chased by a tiger, are you the real you? Are you witty? Are you funny? When you are fighting for your life, when you get mugged and someone's attacking you with a knife, are you the real you? Or is that a fake you? Now, pathology, illness, is in psychiatry, is when we say, okay, we don't like this part of us. That's fair enough. If you don't like it, it's interfering with your goals, that's totally fine. Like, I understand that that needs to be fixed, it needs to be changed. But that doesn't mean it isn't you. Social anxiety is your personality. And this is one of the hardest things to understand. So we don't like to think this way. But this is actually, it's a revolutionary way. If you're trying to conquer your social anxiety, and this is where we look at some of these things like radical acceptance, literally evidence-based stuff. Start by recognizing that your personality is social anxiety. This is you. This is the first most important step that you can take. And what I mean by this is the reason I laid it out that way is because this is like a technical thing about personality. This is what personality is. So let's define what personality is. We're not saying we're not going to change it. We're not saying you can't change it, because you can change your personality, which is absurd. I don't know. This is what I mean. It's like there's the real me, and then there's the false me, and I want to be the real me, and I don't want to be the false me. How about instead we say this is the real you, and we can shape it in this way. This concept of the real me is one of the most damaging concepts, because it implies, I want y'all to think about this, it implies that the perfect product is there. I just need to get to it. I need to get rid of all this stuff. But there's the perfect me. The perfect me exists. I'm so witty. I'm so funny. That's the perfect me. I want to get rid of this fucker, and I just want to be that guy. That's the real me. This is the false me. And if you look at studies on radical acceptance and dialectical behavioral therapy, you begin to realize that the moment that you start to believe there is a fantastical person, the perfect version of yourself, you open yourself up to all kinds of problems, like addictions. Oh my God, dude, I'm not addicted to marijuana. I just get to be me when I get high. I get to live life the way that everybody else gets to live life. I get to be my authentic self when I'm high as a kite. It's the real me that comes out. Not the part that's socially anxious. That's not the real me. I get disinhibited. The deeper, real me gets to come out. And all this noise on the top isn't the right me. I love that idea, man. That sounds so beautiful. Turns out it's wrong. Hey, y'all. If you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. There are actually two sources for anxiety. One is cognitive and one is physiologic. For the majority of people, reassurance becomes something that you become dependent on. You're not really dealing with the root of the anxiety, and it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where the more socially anxious you become, the more awkward you appear, and then it kind of becomes this vicious cycle. So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today. Let's understand what personality is. I'm not saying we're not going to change. I'm not saying you can't be witty and funny. What I'm saying is there's a different way to get there. Remove the delusion that there's a real you and that there's a false you. Instead, accept that all of this is you and all of this can be worked on. Be clear there, okay? Just because I'm arguing against the model does not mean that I don't agree with the goal. Agree with the goal. We just have to understand how it actually works in order to help you get there. Personality is three things: the way you perceive the world around you, the way you internally react, and the way that you interact with the world. That's literally what personality is. Perceptions, reactions, interactions. So, if I take two people with different personalities, the whole point of personality is in the exact same situation. These two people will behave in different ways. I take two human beings who both get a B on a test. The reality of their situation is the same. They both have a B. The way they perceive that B is different. The way that they react to that B is different. The way that they change their behavior is different. One person says, I got a B, thank God. Another says, I got a B, oh shit. The reality is the same. The way we perceive the world around us, the way that that perception evokes reactions, relief, and then the behavior. I'm going to study exactly as much as I did for this test. Oh my God, I didn't study nearly enough. The reality is the same. The human being, the personality determines the way that we react to our circumstances. So let's start with the understanding of the whole reason, and this is like literally what we do in treatment, right? We take people with social anxiety and we help them rewire. So when you are at home and your mom or sister walks by you and doesn't say hi to you, how do you perceive that information? When you're at work and someone walks by you and doesn't say hi to you, how do you perceive that information? What is your internal reaction? When your mom or your sister expresses dissatisfaction with your work product, hey, this pie is a little bit burnt, how do you react? Oh, my bad. I'll do better next time. Let me try to focus on that, because your reaction is based on this idea that they love you and you know that they love you. But when you receive feedback, constructive feedback about your work product at work, what is your reaction? Oh my God, this person thinks I'm terrible. So here's the key thing to understand. And there are personality disorders and social anxiety. I think there's some good evidence to suggest that these two things are separate, right? That there is a social anxiety disorder. There's an avoidant personality disorder. Those two things are not the same. They have different diagnostic criteria. What I'm talking about is not the diagnosis and treatment of a psychiatric illness. What I'm talking about is this perception that there's the real you and there's the flawed you. And you're trying to be the real you all the time. What you need to realize is they're all you. What you need to realize is that even in your social situation, your brain has been programmed and activates a different script. It's not that one is you and one is not you. It is the scripts that your brain is activating. They're all you. Social anxiety is your personality. Is that a problem? Absolutely. But here's the key thing. Everyone thinks personality is static. And this is important to understand. If we think we have a perfect version and we go hunting for it all the time, that is different from understanding that we are wired a particular way and we need to change our wiring. Right? One is something that requires wiring and effort. The other is something that requires hunting. How do I bring this finished product out of me? And this is what I've seen as both a coach and a clinician. The wiring way seems to work better. Now, there's avenues to use the hunting way, which we can talk about if you guys want. But generally speaking, I think accept that social anxiety is the way you are. This is part of your personality. Your personality, the way that you respond to situations, is by perceiving ambiguous stimuli as negative, is by reacting in a particular way, is by behaving in a particular way, being obsequious.
Oh no, really, I'm great. You're so awesome. You did such a good job. Can I do anything else? Can I get you this? Is this okay? Is this okay? Do you love me yet? Do you like me yet? Do you accept me yet? Can I be kinder and you can accept me more and more? And when we engage in these interactions, it does not help us. It actually reinforces things because they say, yeah, you are great. But I did all of these 10 things. You asked for ranch dressing. Here's Thousand Island dressing and French dressing. And I know you like your salads this way, so I did this for you, and I did this for you, and I did this for you. Will you love me and accept me now? And they'll say, yeah, this is great. Thank you so much. You're doing a great job. And we think this helps us. It doesn't help us. Because what did we have to do in order to get that? Now, the actual answer is absolutely nothing. But when we overperform in order to get someone to like us, and we get that positive feedback, what are we reinforcing? Overperformance is the only way that I can get acceptance. And when you have to overperform to get acceptance, you will continue to be socially anxious. Because look, they don't accept me. They accept this pretend version of me. This isn't the real me. This is me doing a lot of extra stuff, and the real me would have gotten rejected, so I have to do all this extra stuff. When you're inducing someone's love, you will never get confidence. So how do you feel relaxed? What's different about your mom and your sister is that you don't have to induce their love to receive it. And that's where the confidence comes from. So if you're someone who's struggling with social anxiety killing your personality, step number one, understand it's not killing your personality, that there are parts of you that are activating, which are activating certain scripts. There's a relaxation script and there's a stress script. They're both part of you. They're both critical for your survival. You can try to activate the relaxation script, but oftentimes there's a reason why we don't do that automatically. So first question you've got to ask yourself is, what makes it hard for me to activate relaxation.exe? Second thing you can do is literally adjust each of those steps. This is so interesting. Very few people train themselves to question their perception.
We always talk about training our willpower, training discipline, training emotional regulation. We never talk about training perception. Most of medical school is not about treatment. It is about training your perception. What do you hear when you auscultate? What do you feel when you percuss? When your patient comes in and says, "Oh my God, you're the best psychiatrist on the planet. You're so amazing. I've had 16 psychiatrists before you, but you came along and you're Dr. K and you're amazing. Oh my God, you're the best on the planet. You can save me when no one else can. You're so great, Dr. K." And if I'm not careful and I haven't trained my perception, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, tell me I'm great. Oh my God, tell me about, oh my God, I'm going to be empathic and compassionate. Tell me about all of these other psychiatrists that are so bad. Tell me about how they screwed you over. Oh my God, I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to reflect. That's so unfair for you. You're so unfair. You're tragic. Oh my God, such trauma. And everyone in the medical system has screwed you and I'm going to be different. You want me to be your hero? I'll be your hero." Instead, we train our perception. Oh shit. This is idealization. This is splitting. This person could have borderline personality disorder. Today, I'm getting the positive side. Soon, I will be number 17 on the list. Train your perception. Recognize that your mind perceives certain things. Specifically with social anxiety, the money is on ambiguous stimuli. When someone doesn't speak with you, when they don't say hi, what's the differential diagnosis? What are the reasons they could not say hi? Have you ever considered that they're socially anxious too? And when they walk in the room, they see you observing them like a hawk. And they're like, "Oh my God, this person is pissed off. They're not smiling at me. I better try to be small because I don't want to piss them off more," so they don't say anything to you. Two socially anxious people walk into a room and they walk out each feeling like they're a piece of shit when they're terrified that the other person doesn't like them. And all they want to do is tell the other person how much they like them, but they're afraid to. Number 2, what is your internal reaction? And just because you react away doesn't mean that it is real. Take a deep breath, go for a walk, really think through things. Number 3, behave in a way that moves, that makes you live the life that you want to live. Don't behave in a way to try to make them feel a certain way. So when someone comes in and you're afraid that they don't like you, what is the life that you want to live? Do you want to say hi to people who walk into the room? Yes or no? Is that the kind of life that you want to live? Do you want to behave with them in the way that you behave with your mom or your sister? Then behave that way with them. But they may not like it. Absolutely. So then if you get data, right? We want a differential diagnosis for the ambiguous data that they interpret. But here's the cool thing. When people usually don't like you, I know we're sort of living in a world where everyone's ghosting and they don't actually tell you that they don't like you. But here's a key tip. If you're afraid that people don't give you feedback when you do something wrong, the number one reason for that is that they don't think you can accept feedback. Why didn't you tell me? This is coming out of nowhere. I feel like I'm being blindsided. Yeah, the reason you're fucking blindsided is because when I do tell you, you react like this, and then you disincentivize me from telling you. People will give you feedback. And the funniest of the version of this is like when people are really anxious, they'll ask for feedback. "Hey, bro, can I have feedback? Am I doing okay? Am I doing okay?" "Yeah, you're doing fine." You know why they tell you you're doing fine and then you end up getting a B or you don't get honors in the rotation? Because every time they tell you you're not doing fine, the anxiety takes over and then they have to deal with that shit for a while, so they can't afford to give you negative feedback even though you're asking for it. The way you receive feedback determines whether people will give you feedback. And so the cool thing about social anxiety is if you're really bothering someone, they will let you know. If you're socially anxious, what happens is we make ourselves small, and then we project their dislike of us to make ourselves smaller, and then we try to disappear, and then we end up where our real self doesn't show up. This is real self too, but that other self can show up. You need to behave in that way. What is the way that, pay attention to the way that you perceive your mother, the way that you perceive your sister. Pay attention to the way that you react when they do or say certain things towards you. How are those two things different? Take a piece of paper, line down the middle. When mom or sister does this, when people at work do this, right? And there's some modifications that you have to make. Some things are not appropriate. I feel like my real self when I'm with my wife. And when she says, "Hey, Alok, your hair looks great today." And I'm like, "Take me now. Let's go to the bedroom. I'll show you other kinds of hair." You know, that's not something you want to do at work, right? So like, a little bit of a difference there. But like, I think There's a big gap between those two things, right? You don't have to like duplicate your at-home self at work, but you also like there's something in the middle there that's pretty healthy. And then when HR calls you in for sexual harassment, you will receive that feedback with grace and aplomb. Hey y'all, hope you enjoyed today's video. We talk about a bunch of topics like this on the channel, so be sure to subscribe for more. If you're already subscribed, GG, and we'll see you in chat.
That didn't stop them from really doubling down on this true story.
Do you think this is the world's most famous DoorDash delivery?
Maybe. I don't know that I would ever be able to say that I've delivered to anybody else that's been more high profile.
How was President Trump?
Very, very kind.
Do you like the Oval?
Oh, it was beautiful.
Is your first time meeting the president?
Yeah, first time in D.C.
Did you vote for him?
I have. Yep.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and guess what? This is going to blow your mind, but yes, Donald Trump and the White House have stepped on their own dicks yet again with another failed PR campaign. If you haven't seen this, yes, the DoorDash grandma, the White House decided the optics on telling everybody that the economy is so fucking bad that grandmas need to deliver for DoorDash to survive didn't seem like a great campaign to begin with, but what did it turn out on top of that? Oh, yes, the entire thing was staged, and the grandma involved is a crisis actor that the GOP uses for a bunch of stuff like this. So, whoa, shocker. Nobody would have guessed that you can't just walk up to the White House as a DoorDash driver. Crazy, but that's the story we're going to talk about in today's video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Helps the channel. Follow us on Patreon. Grab some America First, America Only merch. Let's jump into it. Let's talk about it. Yes, this story has gone viral as a DoorDash driver, DoorDash grandma, showed up to the White House and was personally received by Donald Trump with a McDonald's order, of course. So let's take a look at this totally organic and not staged DoorDash delivery. All right, so here you go. Yes, totally normal. DoorDash drivers can walk straight up to the White House to do deliveries. There's not 9 levels of Secret Service security that you have to go through to finally get to the White House. And how would I know that? Oh, because I've been on a personal tour to the White House. But anyway, I digress. This is super organic. Let's take a watch.
McDonald's.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you. I have your DoorDash. You want to record you? Mr. President.
What's going on? Look at this. This doesn't look staged, does it?
They're all your favorites.
That's good. These are good. DoorDash is doing a good job. So, the reason for this is the fact that I heard you picked up an extra $11,000 that you didn't get because the tax bill was so big. The refund was the biggest you've ever had. Is that a correct statement?
It definitely was. Yeah. I saved over $11,000 by not having to claim.
Okay, yeah, so this, of course, just a totally normal DoorDash delivery from DoorDash grandma wearing the t-shirt and, again, walking straight up to the White House. And, of course, Donald Trump opening the door. MAGA, of course, fell for this right away, by the way. But, I mean, this Trump administration is so fucking lazy that they couldn't even just use, like, someone who wasn't a crisis actor that they've already used for other stuff because, guess what? The internet is undefeated, and what did the internet immediately find? Uh-oh. And here it is. And it says here, interesting that Sharon Simmons, the DoorDasher from Arkansas at the White House, is also Sharon Simmons from Nevada that testified at the GOP Ways and Means field hearing about Trump's big, beautiful bill in Nevada last year. And yes, here we go, exact same woman, but let's take a look at the video.
I'll put this over here, and why don't we have a news conference with the president? Want to do it? Sure. You don't have to space take too much. I think they're looking about...
Simmons, thank you for appearing today. You gave heartfelt testimony. If you can, and you don't know what you don't know, but from your perspective, what do you think this bill is ultimately going to mean for you.
That it's going to free up some stuff for me. It means that I'm going to be able to stay more connected with my family in Missouri. It's going to help with any future.
Well, there you go. Look, a paid actor from the GOP. And what I think actually raises a little bit more concerns is not so much that we see the completely staged DoorDash thing, but what we see is that means that the GOP is using paid actors who pretend to be civilians to come in and weigh in on things like bills. So that's actually highly concerning to think about. It's all fucking fake. Now, of course, this is the most staged, ridiculous shit in the world, but that hasn't stopped, the White House and the GOP from using this as somehow still bullshit propaganda. Of course, the House GOP immediately posts this: no tax on tips. I'm loving it. Yeah, awesome. But let's take a look at the comment section. All right, as usual, in any MAGA comment section, this is the way it always looks. Here we go. House GOP says, no tax on tips. What's not to love? First comment. It's clear at McDonald's has paid Trump to make McDonald's great again. You're feeding your children heavily processed, engineered meat with additives, fillers, preservatives designed for profit. All my tips went into the gas tank. Crying emoji. Even the DoorDasher hates this man. Boo this man. Stop giving our tax dollars to Israel and give us health care. It's our tax dollars. And then, of course, a bunch of stuff about Epstein. But I want to talk about just how objectively terrible this administration is at PR campaigns. I mean, they are trying anything they can to repair Donald Trump's image right now after the Epstein files, after this botched war with Iran. Nothing is obviously working. And so what they decided would be a good idea is to run this as optics as a good thing, right? The fact that a grandma is having to deliver for DoorDash because she can't afford to live, right? And as the sign here says, a grandma delivering DoorDash so she can pay for her husband's treatments in the world's richest country isn't a feel-good story. Now, let's also talk about how ridiculous this was to begin with, okay? So, think about this. Again, the White House trying to say that a DoorDash driver can just drive right up to the White House and just walk right up and knock on the door and greet the president. No, that's not the way it works at the White House, all right? The White House has so many layers of security that you have to go through. You have to be on multiple lists. You have to get escorted in. And if you have to go through all of that trouble to get a DoorDasher in, think about it this way. He's the president of the United States. He's got a bunch of aides that can go get him McDonald's and bring it to the goddamn White House. The White House is not getting DoorDash ever. And also, what did they use this as an opportunity for? This was the same PR speech that Donald Trump claimed that he was a doctor as he portrayed himself as Jesus Christ. So again, the Trump administration used an obviously bullshit staged DoorDash delivery as a way for Donald Trump to try to fix his fuck up.
Did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that?
Bro is literally the worst liar in the fucking world. It's the most obnoxious things ever. But that didn't stop them from really doubling down on this true story.
Do you think this is the world's most famous DoorDash delivery?
Maybe. I don't know that I would ever be able to say that I've delivered to anybody else that's been more high profile.
How was President Trump?
Very, very kind.
Do you like the Oval?
Oh, it was beautiful.
It's your first time meeting the president?
Yeah, first time in D.C.
Did you vote for him?
I have. Yes.
Okay, right. But just think of how pathetic this actually is to try to improve his brand or his PR, because again, his approval rating is in the absolute gutter. He's down near 35% on most polls. So now they figure they're just going to use paid actors to do fake fucking PR campaigns again, just the bizarreness of it, of suggesting that, the economy is so goddamn bad that grandmas need to work for DoorDash. You can't make up how bad they are at this shit. All right, now also quick pivot, sort of related, because again, Donald Trump talking about his excuse of why he portrayed himself as Jesus Christ, because he thought he was a doctor. Well, again, then attacking the Catholic Pope, and we talked about it the other day of, man, where is J.D. Vance in all this? He's supposedly some devout Catholic. I mean, he's got on his bio and his Instagram pinned comment this, right? Very first pinned comment, communion, Finding My Way Back to Faith by J.D. Vance. So yes, we were expecting, of course, J.D. is this devout Catholic. There's no way he would stand for the Pentagon threatening the Vatican and then Donald Trump personally attacking the Pope. No Catholic would ever say that's okay to do. But what did the cowardly lion J.D. Vance have to say about this? Because, man, this guy does not want to be president in 2028. No, he didn't defend the Pope. He came out and said it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality. What do you think they're fucking doing by being anti-war, JD? And again, this dude needs to be excommunicado fucking immediately. The Catholic Church should be excommunicating him for what a piece of shit he is. And again, fake Catholic.
I think that's a reasonable thing, Brett. I don't think that it's particularly newsworthy, but I certainly think that in some cases it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality, to stick to matters of what's going on in the Catholic Church, and let the President of the United States stick to dictating American public policy.
Friendly reminder, this is what J.D. Vance is trying to defend right here.
With the church. Well, first of all, Brett, I think the president was posting a joke, and of course he took it down because he recognized that a lot of people weren't understanding his humor in that case. I think the President of the United States likes to mix it up on social media.
You're hosed, bro. You're cooked. You're done. You've got zero chance in 2028, and this just solidified it. The fact that you again sided with this psychopath Donald Trump after he blasphemed Christ and attacked the Pope, and you took his side as a Catholic. Nah, dog. That ain't it, homie. You're cooked. But I don't think J.D. Vance is going to run for president anyway. Actually, I would probably put my money, and let's put a little claim out here as a forecast. I will bet J.D. Vance does not end up running for president in 2028. We can already see his polling fall into the abyss. I believe he's fallen below Gavin Newsom and the Calciads, and this stuff with the Catholic Church being attacked, him being silent at first, and now the fact that he came out and defended Trump over the church. Yeah, your boy's done. So, more propaganda garbage bullshit from this Trump administration. Again, doing shit that just pisses everybody off, attacking the Pope, blaspheming Christ, and now setting up fake PR campaigns with fake DoorDash grandmas. Hard to know what's coming next. Nothing good, probably. It's going to do it for this one. Catch y'all in the next video.
Pete Hegseth just used a fake Bible verse from Pulp Fiction in a prayer at the Pentagon to justify the war in Iran. So on brand. And all of this is potentially complicated by data showing that young Republican men, people who likely look up to Hegseth, are flocking to the church trying to find holy inspiration for their political beliefs. Now, Hegseth claims that this verse comes from a military source who used it during combat, search, and rescue missions, saying it meant to reflect Ezekiel 25:17. Right, you have him asking the crowd to pray with him, except the verse that he ends up quoting is almost verbatim to Samuel L. Jackson's monologue at the beginning of Pulp Fiction, right as Jackson's character is gearing up to kill a guy.
The path of the downed aviator is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who, in the name of camaraderie and duty, shepherd the lost through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to capture and destroy my brother. And you will know my call sign is Sandy 1 when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
And just so you know what Ezekiel 25:17 actually says, it's, I will execute severe vengeance against them with furious rebukes. They will know that I am the Lord when I take my vengeance on them. So it doesn't mention anything about an aviator or camaraderie and duty, and it definitely doesn't say anything about Sandy 1, which is a rescue mission commander call sign. Most of that's Quentin Tarantino, along with a few riffs from Hegseth to make it sound more military-like. So that, it ended up receiving some pretty embarrassing backlash. But also, aside from how weird or how hilarious it is to a lot of people, like, it speaks to the bigger issue of this administration's weaponizing of Christianity to justify the war.
Grant this task force clear and righteous targets for violence. Let every round find its mark. against the enemies of righteousness and our great nation, and overwhelming violence of action against those who deserve no mercy.
Right, one of the concerns here is that this violent version of Christianity, it could be spreading to younger minds across the country. Recent studies show that 42% of men under 30, they now say that religion is very important to them compared to only 28% in 2023. Young men have even started to grow more religious than young women, which hasn't happened in decades. And you have Bible sales rising along with church membership and attendance as men look for purpose in life that they say the church can provide. Right, and studies say that the men who are flooding the pews are largely Republican, whose numbers are double those of the men on the left. Though I will say that only tells part of the story because all of this is happening as American religiosity is still generally on the decline, which is actually why you have researchers also saying that this influx of Republican men in church suggests political dynamics could be playing a role in all this. And so all of it together, it's something to keep an eye on as you have the top warmonger using the Bible to justify things like bombing schoolgirls and threatening to cut water supplies. Though it's also not just limited to that, because Hegseth's also invoking the Bible to attack the media for its coverage of the conflict while near simultaneously repeating threats to commit what experts say would very likely be war crimes if Iran doesn't, quote, choose wisely and reach a deal with the United States. And that's even as he's now had articles of impeachment filed against him in part for war crimes that Democrats say that he is responsible for. And then in the meantime, the Pentagon's ratcheting up the pressure by expanding its blockade to apply to almost every Iranian-linked vessel anywhere on Earth. And Israel and Lebanon have, according to Trump, agreed to a 10-day ceasefire. So there's a lot that we're going to be diving into here. But as we've covered on the show, Hegseth has repeatedly cast the war in explicitly Christian terms. You've had him literally arguing that American troops are fighting for military victory in Iran, quote, in the name of Jesus Christ. And in a press briefing this morning, you had him comparing the rescue of the crew members of 2 downed fighter jets inside of Iran to biblical miracles and likening reporters in the Pentagon press corps to the Pharisees who criticized Jesus.
A note to the press corps, to the American media. As I just can't help but notice the endless stream of garbage, the relentlessly negative coverage, you cannot resist peddling. Despite the historic and important success of this effort and the success of our troops. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what side some of you are actually on. It's incredibly unpatriotic. Our press are just like these Pharisees. Not all of you, but the legacy Trump-hating press.
There is one notable figure who, based on recent events, would probably disagree with Hegseth's interpretation, and that is Pope Leo. Or with Leo having already said in remarks last month that God ignores the prayers of leaders who wage war and have hands full of blood, which has widely been seen as a veiled criticism of Hegseth. And actually, this week he used a speech in Cameroon to again criticize leaders who use religion to justify spending billions of dollars on war, saying,
"Woe to those who manipulate religion in the very name of God for their own military, economic, or political gain, dragging that which is sacred into darkness and filth. The masters of war pretend not to know that it takes only a moment to destroy. Yet often, a lifetime is often not enough to rebuild. They turn a blind eye to the fact that billions of dollars are spent on killing, on devastation, yet the resources needed for healing, education, and restoration are nowhere to be found."
And really, whatever you think about that, I will say he's not wrong that war is really fucking expensive. Though also a problem with that is that, at least with the Iran war, we have no idea just how expensive. You've had the Defense Department telling Congress that the first week of the conflict cost more than $11.3 billion, but that number doesn't even include many costs that are associated with everything. And since then, we haven't gotten any updates, although you recently had one Harvard academic estimating that the total cost will ultimately amount to $1 trillion. And actually, in a House hearing yesterday, White House Budget Director Russell Vaught was unable to dispel those concerns, saying that he just couldn't give an estimate. Well, he then also claimed that healthcare, education, and low-income energy assistance programs were just riddled with fraud. He defended Trump's request for a massive $1.5 trillion military budget, even though the Pentagon's the only federal agency that has never actually passed an audit. And again today, he just kept declining to provide even a ballpark figure, saying that cost estimates were fluctuating due to factors including the length of the war. And well, yeah, technically, that is a real unknown. We're more than halfway through this 2-week ceasefire between the US and Iran, and there are a lot of different ways things could play out. And with that this morning, before attacking the press, you had Hegseth making it clear that one way is the continuation of fighting, with Hegseth sharing what he said was a message to Iran's military leadership, reminding them that they had been defeated and repeating threats to target civilian infrastructure if they didn't give in to Trump's demands.
We are locked and loaded on your critical dual-use infrastructure, on your remaining power generation, and on your energy industry. But if Iran chooses poorly, then they will have a blockade and bombs dropping on infrastructure, power, and energy.
You also had General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying that he'd like to emphasize
that the United States Joint Force remains postured and ready to resume major combat operations at literally a moment's notice.
He then went on to claim that U.S. military commanders all around the world will now
actively pursue any Iranian-flagged vessel or any vessel attempting to provide material support to Iran.
And as far as exactly what that means, you had the Navy clarifying that all Iranian vessels with active sanctions against them, and vessels suspected of carrying contraband will now be subject to boarding, search, and seizure. And saying that contraband items include weapons, ammunition, combat aircraft, military electronics, but also petroleum products and lubricants due to their essential role in military operations and their contribution to Iran's war-sustaining economy. And so this appears to be part of a broader effort to ramp up the economic pressure campaign on Iran, especially as in lockstep with these announcements, you had the Treasury Department announcing new sanctions on more than 24 individuals, companies, and vessels that it said were operating within the network of an Iranian oil shipping magnate. But, at least so far, the pressure really hasn't yielded any obvious results. You have a spokesperson for Pakistan's foreign ministry saying that a second round of talks between the US and Iran was expected to take place in Islamabad, but he didn't say when. And actually, neither American nor Iranian officials have confirmed as of recording, although both sides have said that indirect negotiations are continuing. And actually, yesterday, you had a Pakistani delegation arriving in Tehran to meet with Iran's foreign minister. But also, even if there is a real desire to end this through diplomacy, it doesn't seem clear right now if either side's actually prepared to compromise. J.D. Vance, who's been leading the talks for the U.S., said this week that Trump wanted to reach a grand bargain in which the U.S. would treat Iran economically like a normal country if it acted like a normal country, and added he doesn't want a small deal. But you then also have an official formerly involved in Trump's negotiations with Iran telling the New York Times that Iran will only make a deal they see as being in their interest, which he argued will most likely be small and transactional. And they added that the Iranian regime just would not capitulate to the administration's demand, just as they did not on the battlefield, in claiming that Trump is unlikely to succeed in trying to force transformational change on a system that feels like it just won a war. And trying to get a deal between Israel and Lebanon may be similarly challenging, although there is apparent progress. Earlier this week, the two countries held their first direct in-person talks in decades. And after, the U.S. announced that the two sides had agreed to launch direct negotiations to end the fighting. And then last night, you had Trump saying on social media that Israeli and Lebanese leaders would speak to each other today, but that conversation never took place. And in the meantime, an Israeli airstrike reportedly destroyed the last bridge connecting southern Lebanon to the rest of the country. Then, you had Trump announcing on social media today that he had spoken with each respective leader and said that they have agreed that in order to achieve peace between their countries, they will formally begin a 10-day ceasefire at 5 p.m. Eastern, with him then adding in another post that he had invited both leaders to the White House for talks. Now, at least as of recording, the Lebanese prime minister has welcomed the ceasefire, but there's also been no comment from Israel yet. And soon enough, you had Lebanon and Israel confirming the ceasefire, but Netanyahu saying that Israeli troops would remain in Lebanon in what he described as an expanded security zone, saying, "This is where we are located, we are not leaving." And then it's also unknown how Hezbollah is going to respond. And then even if this does move forward, as we've seen with the US and Iran, getting a more long-lasting deal, that ends up being a whole other challenge. You know, where I want to end this kind of first section before we get into even more news is just this part's opinion. And I've written a little about this on my Substack at philipdefranco.com. Would love you to subscribe there. But you know, growing up, I don't know if this was the same for you. When people would talk about Iran, when we were told about Iran, it was always this cautionary tale, right? It was often described as this backwards country where religious leaders, they decided what was moral, where the government wrapped itself in scripture to justify whatever it wanted to do. Bomb a neighbor, crack down on dissent, silence the press. Where clerics, they're the ones that tell you what God thinks about your foreign policy. Iran was this place where the state and the pulpit, they weren't just holding hands, it was the same hand. That was the boogeyman, the big bad, that was the regime that we were supposedly so much better than. And understand, this isn't a defense of or an absolving of Iran's supreme leader or the government and the leadership there, but can someone fucking explain to me what's happening in our own damn country right now? Because as someone that's been revisiting his faith, I was born Catholic, I'm not practicing, I'm figuring my stuff out now. You know, I'm watching the Secretary of Defense, though he renamed himself the Secretary of War, stand in the Pentagon and lead prayers asking for God for righteous targets for violence. We're watching him justify bombing another country in the name of Jesus Christ. He's quoting Pulp Fiction, calling it scripture. And then I'm watching the president post AI images of himself as Jesus. And also he's attacking the Pope, like the actual Pope, for suggesting that war, it's not great. We're seeing reports that a Pentagon official essentially threatened to kidnap and kill the Pope. We're watching the Vice President of the United States, who is so disgusting that many Catholics are noting that they are crib Catholics so that they're not put in the same frame as the president, telling the head of the Catholic Church to stick to matters of morality, as if that's not exactly what he's doing when he calls out war. We're all watching this targeted at and landing on a generation of young men who are being handed by this administration and those who enable it a version of Christianity that looks less like the Sermon on the Mount and more like a recruitment pitch. A version of Christianity and just faith in general that's not about loving thy neighbor, it's about identifying your enemy, where God doesn't ask you to turn the other cheek, he asks you to lock and fucking load. A lot of the ways a number of people in power of our government are trying to operate sounds a lot like a country that we were told to be afraid of. And a huge fucking thing to remember is that every authoritarian religious state in history, it started with people who genuinely believed that they were the good guys. They believed their violence was holy, that their enemies were demonic, that those who questioned them were we're probably an enemy. And really, whether you're religious or you're not, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or nothing at all, you should care about this. Right? As someone that covers the news, to make kind of your everyday person care about a situation that's happening over wherever there is, a lot of the time you have to point out to how it's going to impact them. In the case of Iran, for some people that ends up being gas is expensive, stuff is expensive, affordability. But these are people that are just trying to survive. You lose the human element when you hear hundreds or thousands or however many people are getting killed. And understand, if you have leaders in the government or the government itself claiming that God is telling it to bomb people, it doesn't stop there. It never stops there. Eventually, it will get around to telling you what God thinks about what you're reading, what you love, how you live, whether you dissent, if that counts as heresy. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm laughing at the Pulp Fiction thing, going, what the fuck is this? This is a joke. Do not let the fact that it is ridiculous and outlandish distract you from what it is actually revealing. The guy running the most powerful military in human history is using fake scripture to bless real violence. We were told that theocracy was the enemy, but it is a whole hell of a lot closer to home than a lot of people want to admit. And then there's more we've got to dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, running a business is fun right up until you get stuck dealing with, payroll. For fun, one more time, gusto.com/DeFranco. But then, diving right back into the news, we've got to talk about how former Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax and his wife Serena were just found dead in their home early this morning in what police say was a murder-suicide. But according to Fairfax County Police Chief Kevin Davis, the former Democratic official shot his wife multiple times in the family's basement before then running upstairs and fatally shooting himself. And at the time, both of the couple's teenage kids were at home, and their son was actually the one who called 911. In a press conference outside of the home, you had Police Chief Davis saying that the couple was undergoing a divorce and had already separated, but were still living together, and then added
that this has been an ongoing domestic dispute surrounding what seems to be a complicated or messy divorce. From what I understand in this early stage, former Lieutenant Governor Fairfax was recently served some paperwork associated with an upcoming court proceeding. That apparently led to this incident last night.
And when asked if police had previously received any domestic calls from the Fairfax's home, Davis responded,
in January of this year, Mr. Fairfax calls the police and alleges that his wife assaulted him. We responded to that scene. There are several cameras set up inside the house. Apparently, Mrs. Fairfax, at some point during these divorce proceedings, set up a lot of cameras inside the home. We reviewed those cameras and we corroborated that the alleged assault never occurred. So there was no arrest made, there was a report written, but the allegation that Mr. Fairfax made in January that Mrs. Fairfax assaulted him was proven to be untrue.
Now beyond that, at least for now, we really don't have much more information as a recording. But what we do know is that if Fairfax sounds familiar, it's because he had a troubled and tumultuous political career. He was elected as Virginia's lieutenant governor back in 2017, and he served alongside Governor Ralph Northam until 2022. But then, in 2019, both of those leaders were rocked by a series of scandals. First, we had a racist photo depicting one person in blackface and another in a KKK robe surfacing from a 1984 medical school yearbook page dedicated to Northam. While Northam actually initially apologized for appearing in the picture, he later walked it back, saying that he actually wasn't either of the people depicted in that photo, while also then admitting that he had done blackface before as part of a Michael Jackson costume. And so with the sweeping calls for Northam to resign, Fairfax was next in line to take over as governor. But as his chances of taking that top spot started to become likely, two women came forward and accused him of sexually assaulting them in 2000 and 2004. And while Fairfax denied the allegations, he too faced calls to resign, though ultimately both he and Northam served out the remainder of their terms. But still, that scandal hurt his future political career. In 2021, he entered the governor's race, but he then lost the Democratic primary by a huge margin, coming in fourth with just 3.6% of the vote. But as far as this tragedy in Virginia, we're going to have our eyes on it, see if more information comes out soon. But let me say something in the meantime. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, or you can text START to 88788. And let me take this opportunity to say, if you are supporting someone that is going through a divorce or anything, you see warning signs, take them seriously. Resources exist, they're out there, reach out before it becomes an emergency. But with that said, there are also a few more pieces of political news that we gotta hit on today, starting with Trump allegedly telling Marjorie Taylor Greene that it would be her fault if her son were killed as a result of death threats that the president's own rhetoric instigated. Because during an interview with Piers Morgan that aired yesterday, you had Greene talking about how Trump's repeatedly called her a traitor and threatened to destroy her because she pushed for the release of the Epstein files, something that he literally campaigned on. And when asked if she and Trump had spoken since she left office, she said,
"The only time I reached out to him was via text message after I had resigned and he had been attacking me, and I was receiving it in just, I can't even count how many death threats. And but the death threats escalated on one of my children. I was so upset over death threats on my children because of him. And the quotes and the death threat were from what the president had been calling me a traitor. And I'm not a traitor to my country. Standing up for rape victims doesn't make me a traitor. And I reached out to the president and to let him know this is what's happening because what you're saying about me. And he was very unkind about these death threats. And so that was our last exchange.
What did he say to you?
He basically blamed me. He had no compassion for death threats on my children. He blamed me basically that if my son were to get killed, it would be my fault.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and I said back to him, I said, no one's children should ever be the victim of death threats or have any kind of political violence brought on them because of our politics, because of our disagreements. He had no compassion whatsoever.
With Green going on to speculate that Trump's mentally unwell and repeating her claims that he should be removed from office over his post threatening to wipe out all civilization in Iran. And of course, this isn't the first time that Green's spoken out about the death threats that she's received because of her falling out with Trump.
I started getting serious death threats, and a pipe bomb death threat on my home, pipe bomb death threat on my family construction business, and then direct death threats on my youngest child, my son. And those started coming in, and it was dealt with so many death threats. We reported, I think, nearly 773 official death threats.
And while obviously this is horrifying on its own at the individual level, it also speaks not only to the incredible power that Trump has to incite violence and threats, but also his sheer willingness to do so. And I know, understandably, we're always focused on the news of the day, but this is a man who incited a violent insurrection and then functionally condoned and normalized the violence by pardoning the perpetrators. He himself has openly made death threats against Democratic lawmakers and encouraged others to do the same. I mean, Green isn't alone here. Many other political figures that he's targeted have also faced death threats as a result. It is a known thing that his election lies have led to acts of violence and threats against election workers, and yet he keeps spewing them, actively undermining the democratic process. And the fact that he is continuing and in some ways ramping up his violent rhetoric and election lies ahead of the midterms, it's absolutely fucking terrifying. Because at this point, it goes beyond just modeling dangerous behavior. A number of his supporters have made it clear time and time again that they view his words as a call to action. But then also, this other bit of political news I want to hit on is the situation with the Supreme Court. Because we're talking personal attacks, apologies, more criticism, retirement rumors, successors already handpicked by Trump, and that's barely scratching the surface. And actually with this, let's kind of just go down the line. Justice Sonia Sotomayor just issued an incredibly rare public apology to Justice Brett Kavanaugh for her personal attack against him last week, where she was speaking at the University of Kansas Law School when she was asked about Trump's immigration crackdown, and specifically her scathing dissent to the temporary ruling back in September that allowed for immigration-related stops in LA. Because in that dissent, she wrote that with that policy, the Trump administration has all but declared all Latinos, U.S. citizens or not, who work low-wage jobs are fair game to be seized at any time, taken away from work, and held until they provide proof of their legal status to the agent's satisfaction. So when this question popped up, she had a pretty strong response, and though she didn't mention him by name, she did reference Kavanaugh's concurrence and suggested that he was out of touch with what it means to be a working-class citizen in America, saying there are some people who can't understand our experiences even when you tell them. And adding, this is from a man whose parents were professionals and probably doesn't really know any person who works by the hour or the piece like I do. That comment sparking a fair amount of backlash, including a Wall Street Journal op-ed titled Sonia Sotomayor Profiles Brett Kavanaugh. But that then led to yesterday when she was being grilled by journalists about those comments, and she actually walked them back and even apologized, writing, at a recent appearance, I referred to a disagreement with one of my colleagues in a prior case, but I made remarks that were inappropriate. I regret my hurtful comments. I have apologized to my colleague. That sort of public apology from a Supreme Court justice is incredibly rare, but so is, the sort of comment that she is apologizing for. Supreme Court justices have a long history of maintaining public friendships and collegiality, even between those with the biggest ideological differences. So if some say, this whole situation, it highlights the deteriorating relationships in the court, that we are in different times. Right? Even with this apology, it doesn't look like that's a problem that's going to go away anytime soon, especially because others on the court are absolutely not pulling any punches when it comes to criticizing their fellow justices. Right? Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's maintaining pressure on her conservative colleagues over their use of emergency orders to benefit Trump, even going so far as to call those orders back-of-the-envelope first blush impressions of the merits of the legal case, saying the even bigger problem is that the court insists those scratch paper musings be applied by lower courts in other cases, which, is very different from the previous stance that the court took. They used to be very reluctant to step in on cases too early on in the legal process. And so you had Jackson saying there is value in avoiding having the court continually touching the third rail of every divisive policy issue in American life and dadding. In recent years, the Supreme Court has taken a decidedly different approach to addressing emergency stay applications. It has been noticeably less restrained, especially with respect to pending cases that involve controversial matters. But it's also unlikely that we're going to see anything different for a long time. And that's because you have Trump reportedly excited about the idea of appointing yet another justice, as there are rumors out there around Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. Because while neither has expressly said anything about stepping down, there's been speculation running wild, especially after Alito was hospitalized back in March. There, I'll say he's since been back to work, actively participating in oral arguments. And then as far as Clarence Thomas, there have been fewer rumors, but he's getting older. He's 77 years old. And so even with that little bit to go on, you had Trump telling Fox News that he is ready and willing to appoint someone to replace one or both of them.
It's possible. In theory, it's 2 or 3, they tell me. If you just read statistics, it could be 2, could be 3, could be 1. I don't know. I'm prepared to do it.
And that was also something that was echoed by Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who said this week that the Senate Republicans would quickly fill a Supreme Court vacancy if one opens up before the midterms. And actually on that note and the idea of the timing, you had Trump in that same interview pointing to Ruth Bader Ginsburg kind of as a cautionary tale, saying that her refusal to step down while there was a Democrat in office allowed for Trump to pick her replacement. I mean, it's why we have conservative Amy Coney Barrett on the court today. And so you had Trump saying,
Ginsburg could not do it. And she really hurt herself within the Democrat Party. People are very angry at her because I got to appoint people instead of Biden.
And in fact, Alito or Thomas retiring now would be very much in line with how justices have handled stepping down in the past. They're making the choice while their party has the presidency, so their replacement is generally pretty like-minded. We don't know who exactly is on Trump's shortlist to fill a seat. He reportedly seemed interested in naming Ted Cruz, with Trump pointing to Cruz as a potential pick earlier this year, even joking that he'd get unanimous support from the Senate because they want to get him out of there. But at least for right now, nothing confirmed one direction or the other, and so we're gonna have to keep our eyes on it. But that, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is the end of your Thursday Philip DeFranco show. But I'll also tell you while you're leaving a funny and angry, whatever your reaction is to one of the stories that stood out to you today, comment. I'll remind you that there's more to watch right now, whether it's the brand new Crashing Out episode, which there's going to be a trailer for, or if you missed last night's Philip DeFranco show, I got links in the description, or on YouTube, you can click or tap here. But as always, thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here next time.
The president is committing blasphemy. It's blasphemy, Phil.
The president just attacked the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics because the Pope said war is bad and don't kill civilians.
I've been yelling that this man is the Antichrist for quite some time now.
Trump asked, what does teleport mean? And quote, was he kidding?
The First Lady of the United States just showed up and she just went, I have never been friends with Jeffrey Epstein.
He got slapped up so hard his authoritarian ass was like, good game.
And that's not a sketch, everyone. That's just the world we fucking live in.
Does any ethno-nationalist state need to exist? Like, does Japan need to remain fully Japanese? Does Germany need to remain fully German? I don't think so.
Well, you're walking right into the discussion that I thought we were going to have, so this is like the most interesting thing to me. Right, first question. You said Japan, Germany. I know when you spoke to Destiny, you said something about fear of like black crime in the United States or whatever, or even South Africa. That's probably
I said like
a better example.
The arguments for like keeping racial quotas and...
When you say racial quotas, what do you mean?
For immigration. Israel must have like this many Jews. We can't let this many Arabs in. If we got too many Arabs in, they'll overwhelm the vote sort of thing.
Okay. So
I'm aware that there are millions of Arabs in Israel, by the way.
Yeah, like a fifth of the population. Yeah. But yeah, like that, again, left, right,
actually closer to
Israeli,
2/9
Jew,
of the population.
They're going to want a Jewish majority, yeah, unless they're fucking like Hadash or some crazy fucks. Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, most states do this, but like it reminded me, and it was evocative of like white supremacist arguments for if we let
when
too
we
many
say
black people
Jewish
in, or
majority,
black people
do
in
we
this
mean
city, like then this will
Jewish via race or Jewish via like culture, like not culture but religion?
Oh, it's always ethnicity, race. It's always that. It's never religion. Okay. Nothing about this has anything to do with the religion. Anybody that brings up religion
none of them care about it.
Yeah, will happen. And like even if that was true, if there was like a black crime gene, I don't think that justifies the ethnic cleansing. You'd have to like.
Wait, is it ethnic cleansing to control your immigration for demographics? To say you can't immigrate to here on big enough into massive numbers?
I guess it's not cleansing because it's preventing the ethnic shift at all. But it's like
it's like saying that like if Arabs want to immigrate to Israel, we're probably going to have like low numbers to keep a Jewish majority. That's like the gist, right?
Sure, but I would view that as the same justification for, hey, there are too many Arabs in the country, let's export a bunch of them, right? Like it's the same mentality. Does that make sense?
No, I think controlling immigration.
Let me say it one more time.
He said.
Just to make sure we're on the
same
page.
He said. No. He said.
Saying I'm going to prevent a certain quantity of this ethnicity or nationality from coming in is the exact same, even though it's not the same consequence. It's the same prescription as, oh, they're already here. Let's get that same number, that same ratio in this country. So either we're stopping them from coming in or we're kicking them out. Either way, this seems to be, I mean, obviously there are nuances of, oh, they're already here, but this is the same sentiment. We need to protect this ratio. We need to protect this majority. No?
Goofy noise.
Okay, I see what you're saying in terms of like their mindset, but I would rather get turned down entry to a country than kicked out of where I live.
Yeah, that's like why I said, like,
Yeah,
well,
okay.
if it's already here and this is your home, obviously you're going to have a distinction
Okay,
there. But like,
okay,
it's the same sentiment.
you're making me want to ask so many questions. Okay, so one.
Okay, fire away.
You mentioned America or like a fear of like black racism or like Japan or apartheid South Africa is a good example, right? Like the fear of giving them voting rights because black people became the majority with voting rights, right? My question is, do you think anti-Semitism and anti-white racism are equally valid concerns?
There you go. No,
I think the people who make the arguments view them the same, but
Doesn't
I think
matter.
Anti-Semitism is a obviously much more realistic one. I mean, like, you know, there are people who say white genocide. That would be like the utmost, like you are conflating a slight decline in your demographics due to natural population shifts to this country came in and tried to wipe out the Jewish population versus like.
Be careful not to get caught up in disagreeing with certain things because you think it leads to another thing.
So what do you mean in this instance?
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Sometimes there can be things that are justified. The reason why we say those things are bad, though, can rest on the underlying fact of the matter. When we say that January 6th was bad because it was bad to commit to an insurrection, that's not really what we mean, even though that's what we're saying, because we're taking for granted the underlying fact of the matter. First of all, the country was founded on insurrection, right, and rebellion against. So it's kind of weird to have that as a rule. If it was